Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Warcraft video. So why the hell are we just going to be killing each other again? I mean, this stuff isn't play fighting, right? In this expansion, hundreds, thousands of people are going to die. That's one of the most persistent things that I've heard from people about Battle for Azeroth. Why are we going to be killing each other? And today we're going to dive right into that topic, and basically how we're going from uneasy friends to basically killing each other in a massive war that's going to leave piles and piles of dead soldiers, dead civilians, and lots of nasty stuff. Now, we are going to get into some real-world stuff here because it's a handy example to illustrate a point, but I mean, obviously this is about a game, so take this with a grain of salt. So, let's talk about nukes, big old nukes. When they were first weaponized, the whole thing is they were orders of magnitude above the military capabilities of the people who did not have the nukes. That's why governments are really concerned in general about countries getting nukes. They're a bit of a game changer. Now, our Warcraft equivalent to this, as odd as that sort of sounds, is Azeroth. Can it destroy a city? Well, who the hell knows, but Blizzard have been very clear about how powerful the damn stuff is. Whoever has the Azeroth has this big new source of power. So this is where we bring up the end of the Second World War. Okay, so Japan was ready to mount a really serious defense of their island, and like a really serious defense with massive civilian mobilization and all that stuff. Now, the Allies had planned Operation Downfall, which was an invasion of Japan using traditional enough methods. Now, no one was under any illusion here that Japan could actually win the overall war, but the point was that the actual fight could happen. Well, then the US used their nuclear weapons, and that changed the game. One side was so immeasurably more powerful than the other because of these nukes that the fight ended quite swiftly. Plus, the Soviets also invaded Manchuria, which is something that's not often talked about and was also a major thing that knocked them out of the war. But enough awkward history chat, let's get back to the game. So, I know mana bombs exist in WoW and it's a crazy universe that's all fantasy land and madness, but Azeroth is kind of a nuke-like situation, okay? So it's a quantum leap above the rest of the things in terms of how much power it has. So if one faction doesn't bother to secure it, then the other one will be able to steamroll them. And this means that a character like Anduin Wrynn, who is supposed to be a pacifist, or at least was at one point, is in a really tough position, because if he lets Sylvanas and the Horde claim most of this new, super powerful resource, then he allows two things to happen. First, he gives them the military capacity to wipe the Alliance out. Second, he sort of loses a bargaining chip, and that means in any negotiations he's in a terrible position. This means that he has no choice but to go to war, and a full-scale war. If one side lets the other win the Azeroth, then they put themselves in a catastrophically terrible position. And I think that this scenario has something kind of interesting to say about the idea of being pacifist to a fault, how sort of things play out differently in the real world to what we would think is ideal, and how sometimes action can maybe, either be unavoidable or whatever. I think there's a little bit of an interesting angle to this. But that's why a peace-loving character like Anduin could be forced to mobilize the army. Now, in the real world, we stocked up our nukes, we had a sketchy few years, let's just say, and then we've maybe slowly started to put them down, I guess. Well, over in Azeroth, this resource has just popped up, and even if both sides think it would be a good idea that neither of them touch it, do you really think anyone trusts each other enough? Look, I mean, I'd play Horde, okay, but I wouldn't trust Sylvanas as far as I could throw her, and that's not very far. Do I trust her to just not collect this extremely powerful thing? No. And I think this is the main perspective of why we kind of maybe have to go to war in a way. But what about N'Zoth? So, this is a good question, and it's one of the most common points brought up when talking about this expansion. I think we all agree, N'Zoth is a naughty boy, and we should probably put him in the bin someday. But we, in this context, are the player characters. We have been operating above the faction lines in Legion in terms of the storyline, so characters like Sylvanas, Anduin, and most of their cohort didn't even join us on Argus. Canonically, they have been at home defending the various different holdings back in Azeroth. This means that they're a little bit less clued into the Void stuff than we are. I mean, they haven't really sort of fully experienced it as viscerally as the players have. And then there's some events like with Illyria where they're not widely known things until the allied race content happens, which timeline-wise is just before the war sparks off. Now, the Old God Whispering is also something that we personally have dealt with more than a lot of these characters have. Plus, importantly, they're all leaders of their factions, so they, unlike us, are concerned with different sets of threats. Right now, those threats they're concerned about are not really big picture. But like, as an example, if you're the king and someone's just invaded one of your cities, well, shit, you've got to mobilize the army and do something about it, even if it's a distraction. So these characters might very well believe that N'Zoth is a big threat, as we do, but also think that, well, he's not here right now, is he? So we can deal with him later, and let's deal with the Azerite problem now. And that's how a lot of those characters could justify all this stuff going down. But let's talk about the characters. So I've already touched on why Anduin would be compelled to go to war. Those political realities also sort of align with him growing up, right? Turning from an idealistic boy into a leader with the weight of many in his shoulders, and that's kind of been his wider character arc. Taking up his father's sword and the broken sword very much as a symbolization, or symbolizes, that's the word, this transformation in his character. So I think that we will have an Anduin who is forced to be a strong king by the realities of the circumstance that he finds himself in, but who still tries to stay true to his values. Now, he's also just seen his mentor, in some ways, Velen, finally take action, and you know what? It went pretty damn well for him. Anduin's other mentor, Gen, and his family friend, I suppose, Jaina, have also both been pretty damn pro-war people, so it seems, if you look at his close circle, it's time for action. Now, as for Sylvanas, well, she wants two things. She wants a secure future for herself, and a secure future for her people. The core of her teased Legion arc was basically which of these two desires takes precedence. Would she sacrifice herself for her people, or sacrifice her people for herself? Either way, Azerite is something that she will need. We have seen Sylvanas be really ruthless when it comes to war, right? So she was happy to use the new plague, and then of course she'll want to use as much of this new resource as she can. She's a pragmatist. So she is also, of course, in the same position as Anduin. So if he goes for the Azerite and she doesn't, well, then she's screwed, so she has to go for it. So as you can see, we're in that sort of sticky situation where the only way out of a war is for the factions to talk to each other. This historically has not went fantastically in the game, and at the start of the expansion it seems like neither side has been pushed to a breaking point in terms of the war, and yeah, right now they're probably just trying to war it out so they can gain an upper hand, and then when they do go to peace, they know they can get good terms from their enemy. At the very least, it seems like it's going to be a very bloody start to Battle for Azeroth. I think our campaign, like the leveling stuff, will have a lot of that happen. I suppose it could be a bit of a reflection, like in terms of the story, how, like, you know, if you look at things from a very high level, war is rarely ideal, but wars still do happen, and they're not the best solution to a problem, but sometimes they are a bit of a solution to a problem. And I think what Blizzard might try to do in the storyline is contrast the boots on the ground sort of perspective of a war and all of that stuff with the 30,000 foot view, because as soon as N'Zoth appears, we're all going to look tremendously stupid, having done what we previously thought was a very just war. Or at least something which we felt was just after events like the Undercity and Teldrassil. So I think narratively it actually has a lot of potential to be very interesting, very character driven, and then have a pretty cool moment where the rug is pulled from underneath their feet, N'Zoth happens, and we see how all of these characters deal with the fact that they probably helped out the enemy a bit. So overall I think it's quite interesting. I still can see why there are disagreements with the way they're taking the storyline, but at least this is sort of me I think explaining why this war does actually make sense, even though wars themselves, when you look at it from very far off view, maybe they don't always make sense. But there you go, that's a little bit of an explainer for some of the Battle for Azeroth lore stuff. I'm keen to hear what you think about where the plotline's going, so sound off down in the comments. But that's it for me, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.